I'm Teacher Mike, and this is episode 4 of the podcast English Conversation with Teacher Mike. On this podcast, I have conversations with English learners, English teachers, and other people who speak English so that you can practice listening to English while also learning new ideas that you can use to improve your English. Our guest on this episode is my friend and former coworker from the UK, Teacher Zoe. And since, just like me, Teacher Zoe is an experienced English teacher, our topic today is how to improve your English. So, first things first, Zoe, could you please just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and also what kind of learners you have experience working with?
Yes, of course. Nice to see you, Mike. So I'm Teacher Zoe, or just Zoe, and I've been teaching for about 11 years and about 9 of those online. So I'm quite experienced and I live around the world. So working online really suits me. I teach adults, mainly one-to-one, and it could be IELTS or business English. And really the aim is fluency. So my learners range from, 6 years old to maybe 66 years old. And they could be from Hong Kong or Belarus or Italy or Costa Rica. It really could be anywhere.
Great. And so where do you live now and where have you lived in the past?
Well, that's a big question. Now I'm in Hove, which is the city of Brighton and Hove on the south coast of England, 1 hour from London. But next week I will be in Gran Canaria. And then in about a month, I'll be in Thailand. And in the past, I've lived in many countries, including, as you have, Thailand, where I was for around 7 years, not continuously, but I've spent quite a lot of my adult life there.
All right, and let's get straight into it with some questions about English. So, Zoe, first question, can you just explain to everyone what does it mean to be fluent in a language?
I think for it does mean something slightly different to different people, but fluency is having a language flow that is somehow automatic, that doesn't require constant translation. So if you can perhaps think in English and communicate in English quite quickly and quite accurately, it may be that you are fluent. Some of my students are B1 level and they're fluent, um, but they may not have some things like idioms and phrasal verbs or a wide vocabulary, but they are able to speak at length and be understood and be in a conversation with a native. So I think that's what fluency means to me.
Great. I really like that answer. I like how you kind of pointed out that fluency can be achieved at different levels. You don't have to be the most advanced speaker in the world to be fluent. Fluency, like you said, is really about the flow and the speaking automatically without translating. Thank you. I like that answer. And what do you think are the main reasons that people struggle to become fluent in a language?
I think there's so many because language learning and language is very personal. And everyone's journey is different, where you start and then how you progress. So you could have someone who's learned English their whole life, but feels they're never going to make it. They have this kind of illusion of a finish line, whereas obviously it's always work in progress. So sometimes people just stop themselves. That's the main reason. They think I'm never going to do it, so what's the point? Or I'll do lots of grammar exercises because I enjoy them. Oh yeah, next week I'll do some listening, or I'll look into getting a teacher. But for now, I'll just look at modal verbs of past deduction or something that you might not use very often. So I think you need to have a real active desire and be active if you want to become fluent.
What do you mean by be active? What should people be doing if they want to achieve fluency?
Um, Practice. It's all of the 4 skills. There's probably more than 4 skills, but the main ones we talk about are the input, so the listening, um, and the reading or watching, and then output, so speaking and writing. When my students get stuck, I ask them, what listening have you done? What reading have you done? Just read something. It could be rubbish, it could be a magazine, it could be anything, but just actively listen and read and write and speak in whatever way you can.
And in your opinion, which should people generally focus on more, grammar or fluency?
Ooh, well, my instinct, my gut reaction is to say fluency, but you can't really have one without the other. And I think because I've been teaching for so long, I don't mind if people don't have excellent grammar, but you do need to be able to put a sentence together in a coherent way. And English is more tricky than some languages in that way. So, definitely starting from a perspective that grammar is really important. But as you get the basics, then just head for fluency as quickly as you can, really.
Okay, I like that answer. And as English teachers, we sometimes tell students, um, don't worry about making mistakes. Making mistakes is normal. And sometimes when students hear that, they think that what it means is that they shouldn't try to improve their grammar. And they think, oh, I can make mistakes. Grammar isn't important. But that's not really what we mean, right?
Oh, that's really hard to answer. I'm very friendly, but I'm a strict teacher. So my students know as soon as they've made any mistake that I've seen it. And the reason I'm like that is actually to encourage people to self-correct. So really, as you were saying, you can have what you might call sloppy grammar. And that's all right if you are trying to get to the fish and chip shop on the seafront, for example. But then again, if you're trying to get to the shop of fish at the seaside, I might not know what you mean. So you need to be clear, you need to be understood. And that really is why grammar's there. It's not there just to be annoying. So small things like gerunds, verbs and gerund combinations and prepositional phrases and things like that, they are annoying. And maybe you can, get those wrong here and there. But for me, I think it's a holistic approach. If you're not academic, you also might find grammar more difficult, in which case, listen a lot, maybe learn more phrases, but do try to be aware of when you might make mistakes, I think, and do try to correct them because the English ear does pick up on these mistakes. Whereas, non-native speakers might think, well, that's not important. It kind of sounds strange and can also change meaning. So I would say, do your best. I suppose, do your best, do your best. Don't give yourself a hard time and don't stop it. Don't stop yourself speaking because you're not quite sure, because that's silence is definitely not communicating well.
I love that answer. And there were maybe three things that I noticed in there that I really liked. One was that the English ear will notice your mistakes and it will sound strange. And it's okay to sound strange, it's okay to be unique. But the thing here is that if something sounds really strange, it makes it more difficult to understand. When you say things that aren't correct, it's not always difficult to understand just because it's incorrect. It's often difficult to understand because it's something that we've never heard before, and therefore we have to stop and think, wait, what does that actually mean? Another thing I liked was that you said if you are not a very academic person, meaning you're probably not someone who wants to really study grammar, then you should listen. And yeah, this is a very, very good point, because lots of people think that learning grammar means studying from a textbook, and it doesn't. Just listening to what people say in everyday conversation helps you improve your grammar, in my opinion, often more than studying from a textbook does. Um, I think there was one other thing that you said. Oh, it was that you said that I don't remember if this is exactly what you said, but you said something like grammar is not to make your English sound good. It's there because it has a function. It really affects the meaning of what we are saying. So when we're saying that you should try to improve your grammar, we're not saying that you should do that to show off your English level or something like that. We're saying you should try to improve your grammar because it affects how effectively you can communicate the ideas that you want to communicate.
Yeah, and often it makes language more concise as well. That means kind of short or brief. So you can communicate a lot in a very short space of time, and maybe not a very complex sentence. But if you're constantly looking for ways to put a sentence together because you haven't quite mastered different techniques, you can be there for a long, long time saying not much. And so grammar is also there to help you really achieve, yeah, communicate well.
In your opinion, what is the number one thing that you think people should be doing to improve their grammar?
Their grammar. Um, Number one thing.
Or what's one of the main things?
I think it just depends on what your flaws are. I mean, a good way of figuring it out is you have to diagnose yourself, like a doctor. So I use a certain website where there's different tests for B1, B1 plus, B2. And it's lovely because it mixes grammar, tenses, phrasal verbs, and things like that. If you do one of those tests, it will quickly become clear where your problems are. And those are the areas you should try to work on. And there's so many resources on the internet. You'll find something that you enjoy or that works for you. Speaking, trying to speak at length, trying to write at length. Writing is, it's very clear when grammar's wrong in writing or when grammar isn't so good in writing. And it really helps me as a teacher as well, just write about your weekend even, or write why you feel you are passive aggressive. That came up recently. I do lots of psychology tests because they're quite fun. And something people are passionate about. So you just write, and I'm like, okay, you can see this and you can see that. And I give them an opportunity to correct themselves. So again, for me, a big thing is just self-correction, knowing most of the grammar rules and then being able to find when you're not using them correctly. That it is so difficult, but doing something like an online grammar test is a really good way of finding out your difficulties.
So essentially, what you are saying, I think, is that it's not just about trying to learn more and more advanced grammar. What it's really about is using the language and making mistakes in the language that you are using so that you can see, okay, this is one thing I need to improve, because if I improve this, then I will be able to say it correctly.
I think so, because if you perfect what you already have or as close as possible, then you're ready to add things on. If you imagine it's a package of something and you have these bolt on additions. So, sentence structure, very important. Tenses, very important. Or I don't know if you've been there or if you're going there next week. And then we're in a different conversation at the same time. And then when you've got that and when you feel quite comfortable with that, you think, hang on, I'm not really using adjectives at all. And I don't really know what adverbs are. And when I do use adverbs, I put them at the wrong place in the sentence. So, it's a slow progression, but it does need to be on solid foundations, I would say. So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood you, and I think I do. That's and yeah, that's kind of how I try to improve my Thai. I never look on the internet or in a grammar book and say, what are some advanced grammar rules? Instead, what I do is I try to make a sentence and I show it or say it to a Thai person and say, is this correct? And if they say, no, it's not correct, you need to change this. Okay, I've improved my grammar by fixing that sentence.
Oh, it's invaluable. And I mean, different languages work in different ways. So Thai, I don't have Thai people around me really. So I would use Google Translate. But as I advance slightly, I will even use the microphone function, because that will show me whether my tones are correct, for example. Because if they're not, then the translation will show up as some sentence with no sense in there. So I think always walking around and thinking, how would I tell Teacher Mike that later I'm going to do a podcast? Well, I think it's this, but is it tam or is it a different verb? And then, yeah, I will just usually check on a translation site roughly. And then at some point, I'll have a list of questions to ask a human.
Okay, so yeah, 100%. My example, I talked about a Thai person, but yeah, it doesn't need to be a person. You can use Google, you can use ChatGPT, any resources that you have. Just try your best to make some sentences and try to find a way to check them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that really, it is as simple as that. I some of my students who don't seem to learn vocabulary, and they say, I want to learn vocabulary. And I think, well, you're kind of wasting your money, sit here for an hour and I teach you like a few words. But so what I do is I just say, okay, what's this? They don't know. What's this? Oh, some kind of, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not. And I say, you should be able to look around your room and be able to say everything in that language. If you want to learn vocabulary, not everything is a thing in front of you. But if you don't know what a cushion is, then, it's not that high level. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. People all the time say like I make these short videos sometime where I show people I'm squatting, I'm kneeling, I'm sitting cross-legged. And they're like, "Oh, these are so useful." And it's like, I really don't think that these are incredibly useful because all you have to do is look around every day and say, "What's that person doing? What's that person doing?" Just thinking it in your head. What is that person doing? Do I know the word in English? No, I don't. Okay, so I'll look in a dictionary. Vocabulary is really one of the easiest things to improve because you just look around. Oh, that's a chair. I don't know what that is. I'll look it up.
There's also something about awareness that you can't literally translate. And that's always quite funny, isn't it? I love that in a lesson when someone says, oh, you're sitting not cross-legged, but you're sitting, yeah, in the lotus position. Obviously not that, but something that doesn't quite work, because in their language, that is what you call it. And it opens up a wonderful conversation, but also makes you aware, think about the culture behind it. And are they really going to say the same thing? Do we take food or do we eat food even? And breakfast, lunch and dinner, what time are they? They're probably not the same between cultures. So, yeah, cross cultural communication is another massive thing, but it's what makes language so exciting and also funny and enjoyable, I think.
That is another very, very good point. Language affects culture, and culture affects language. So when you're learning a language, you do need to also understand the culture. English is a little bit different though, because I mean, English isn't a language that's used by one culture. But if you're planning on using it with people from the United States, yeah, you should make an effort to understand our culture a little bit. If you're trying to learn English to communicate with people from the UK, then yeah, you should learn a little bit about their culture as well. Yeah.
People are quite concerned about politeness because they believe that British people might, know the king and queen or something like that. And British people are kind of polite. I don't even know what I'm trying to say here, but in their language, politeness has a different meaning, or it could be kind of hierarchical or something, and people get quite worried about making mistakes. And that is actually fair enough. I think that they are worried about making the mistakes. And so it is quite nice just to be in a culture. Lots of my students are in the UK, you see, but they may be from Turkey or Russia or somewhere quite different, or China. And so I do say, when you're in the cafe, listen to the conversations around you, or tell me about why it is you're worried. Well, I saw this guy in the street and he was drunk, and maybe in their culture that wouldn't happen. One of them got angry, like road rage in his car. I wanted to shout out the window. I was like, yeah, but that's going to end up in a fight. And he said, yeah, but in my country, you kind of just have the fight and then carry on with your day. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. So he wanted like ideas for language, but in some ways, is that language or is that cultural advice, on what's appropriate?
Yeah, a kind of a very similar example is Arabic speakers sometimes ask, "What do you say to someone after they get a haircut?" I'm like, "You don't say anything because that's a cultural thing, that's not a language thing." You could say, "I like your haircut. Nice haircut. Oh, did you get a haircut?" But there's no standard thing that you say to someone as kind of like a blessing or whatever it is, because that's not something that we do in our culture.
Yeah. And but then ask those questions as well. If you're lucky enough to have a teacher, maybe you pay for them, maybe you don't, but or you do language exchange with people, do ask them those things, because yeah, they're things that bring us together as humans, that make us learn about each other. Things like the significance of tea in different cultures. It's wonderful. All these kind of small rituals and things you do, and when you might drink coffee and why, and if somebody has to start drinking coffee first. It's just lovely that I find, in the cultures I relate to, which is kind of British culture. I do feel we're quite free with things, but then yeah, having to say something about a haircut might seem a bit strange, or asking if you're married immediately and how old are your children, you know, might not be the first question you ask someone when you meet them in my culture.
Exactly, exactly. And I didn't mean to say that asking about those questions is a bad thing to do. In fact, yeah, yeah, you should ask any question that you have. Yeah, ask it. I mean, don't not any question that you have in a conversation, but any question that you have for a teacher or for someone who can help you learn the language. So asking, what should you say to someone after they get a haircut? That's a great question, because if you didn't ask that, you wouldn't know that we don't say anything. So yeah, you should be asking these questions. I didn't. If anybody thought I was saying, "Oh, that's a silly question" or "That's a bad question," no, that's not at all what I meant. You should be asking any question that you have if you think it's going to help you communicate or deal with your daily life situations. Ask all your questions. Okay, Zoe, and how important do you think pronunciation is?
It's important because if your pronunciation is really not coherent, then you will not be understood, because words, as we know, there are lots of words, especially in English, that sound similar but have a very different meaning. And so you could be confusing your listener, who might be feeling it's rude to say, sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. So, if you have good pronunciation, I think it helps to avoid being misunderstood. And especially if you're using English for work, because most people in the workplace, they won't be corrected at all, and people won't ask. They will just sit, listen, not understand, and then, you haven't got your point across. So I think being aware of the pronunciation problems that perhaps people who speak your language have. So um, Thai, for example. I think a few of those, like the V and the W could be a bit confused, possibly. And not saying the ending of words is a big one, and S's. I mean, that's a really hard thing to try and make people do. It, she, he, says, runs, thinks, looks. But if you go the extra mile and use really good pronunciation, people will automatically think you're a lot better at English, actually. So you might know all the grammar in the world, but your pronunciation isn't very good, or you don't link any words together, or use any of those functions of spoken English. And then really you're not doing yourself, a favor, because you just sound like a lower level than you are. So one thing I do think is probably your pronunciation level should match your English level in general. But if you like pronunciation and you want to improve it, just go for it. There's quite a few resources. It's not that easy, but listening and repeating is obviously quite a good thing to do. And if you're not sure how words are pronounced, you just need to go to any dictionary website, and there'll be a listen button, and also the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. And so in some ways, there's no excuse for not knowing how things are said. And there's horrible things in English like GH, cough, through, thorough, rough, and you might get those wrong. That's completely understandable. But if you want to shine as an English speaker, I would say really work on your pronunciation.
A few things stand out to me with what you said. First is that your answer is very similar to your answer about grammar. It's not just about trying to show off. It's important because it's a tool that helps you say things that people can understand. You don't need to have good pronunciation because it makes it look like you're really smart and you're advanced and all this stuff. You want to have good pronunciation because it will make it easier for other people to understand you, which means that it will be easier for you to communicate with other people. I also like what you said that people always ask me, like, how do you pronounce this word? How do you pronounce this word? And that's fine. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to answer questions. They're good questions, but you shouldn't wait 24 hours for your teacher to respond on social media when you can just go to an online dictionary and click the button and listen to it. And I think a lot of people either don't know or just forget that you can do that. Every online dictionary has a button that you can click and it will show you how the word is pronounced. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for reminding everyone of that.
But if you're doing your listening practice, I feel that your pronunciation should automatically get better. You might have maybe a hearing impairment. You might not be talented somehow at listening. I do find people who can sing are a lot better at pronunciation because we rise and fall, we have intonation. And people who might be shy also might just feel silly trying, you know, but that shouldn't hold you back. So I think if you're doing your listening, somehow that should infiltrate your brain and some of it should come back out in spoken English. You can record yourself, again, uncomfortable, but life can be uncomfortable. If you want to get on in life and improve, you might have to do things like that. So something that we call being self-conscious, not liking listening to yourself. I don't like listening to myself, but it's part of my job. And so, take it with a pinch of salt, as we say in English. Just don't take it too seriously.
And yeah, one thing that I really like that you said there is that listening. Listening is one of the number one things that people should be doing, in my opinion, to improve their pronunciation. I'm glad that you said that. A really good example for me right now, I'm studying Thai for the first time in a very long time. I haven't really studied it in a focused way in many years, but now I'm starting to again. And one thing I've realized is that my pronunciation for phrases that you hear often, like thank you, where are you going, have you eaten lunch yet, my pronunciation on those things is really good, but usually not amazing, but pretty good. I don't want to sound like I think it's amazing. It's not. But they're pretty good. But when I have to create a new sentence, even if it's with words that I can pronounce separately, if I'm creating a new sentence, putting those words together in a new way, then yeah, my pronunciation gets a lot worse because I'm not repeating something that I have heard before. And when you hear things again and again and again and again, you know how to pronounce them. So yeah, listening as much as possible, in my opinion, is one of the number one things that everyone should be doing.
And obviously, you want to say new things, which is wonderful. So then just practice them a bit and see if they sound, I don't know, see if they sound good. And then if you're not sure, do record them and try and share them with someone. I do lots of kind of mirroring or shadowing um, with my students where I send them phrases. And it's quite strange because they often send them back and they do sound exactly like me. But then does that also mean they can say everything in my voice? Well, no. So you need lots of different techniques. And above all, really, you need to be able to be flexible. So you need to listen a lot and you need to speak a lot with different people as well, if you can.
One thing I want to go back to that you said there is that it's important to try to say things correctly and feel like, did I say that correctly? Should I change this sound a little bit? It's important to do this, even though you're not always going to know. Sometimes you might think, oh, that was really good, but actually it wasn't. Sometimes you might think, oh, I didn't say that part correctly, but actually you did. Without a teacher, it's impossible to know, but you still should try, because trying this and practicing this is a lot more useful than not doing it. So I often ask my followers on Facebook, how do you practice speaking? And for about 50% of them, the answer is I listen to BBC. I watch podcasts. What do you think about that?
That doesn't make any sense to me. Surely that's listening.
Exactly. So I feel like a lot of people don't understand that practicing speaking means using your mouth. And it doesn't always need to be a real conversation with another person. We don't always have opportunities to have conversations with other people. And sometimes that's not even the most important thing that you need to do. Sometimes you really need to focus on the sentences that you need to focus on, not random sentences that you might be using in this conversation with some guy who's talking about apples. Um, so, can you give a few suggestions for how people can practice speaking, especially if they don't have someone to practice speaking with every day?
Yeah, yeah. So as you say, it's speaking out loud. It really is just speaking out loud. Um, Something nice. So I'll give you some advice from my students actually, that seem to really work for them. Every day at the end of the day, one of them just talks about her day like a diary. Dear diary, today was a difficult day. I went to the shops in the morning, but they didn't have the kind of breakfast cereal I like, and that put me in a bad mood. So I decided, so it's this kind of sequence of events because that's often often speaking is storytelling. Yeah, you see, as you say, you see something in the street, you see something quite peculiar, something quite strange. How would I make someone understand that, even if I don't have that much language? You know, there was a man, he was shouting. I don't know why. You know, it doesn't have to be the most amazing speech, but you've said it, you know. And then another thing that recently one of my students did, that she suddenly seemed to leap up a level. And I think it was just speaking, like, at all, because her level's quite good in here, but she finds it hard to produce language. Was she used a site that was like a very simple news site that had questions for conversation at the bottom. But this one is Ingoo, Engoo, and it's free. And it's daily news, and you can choose your level. And they're quite interesting articles. They're not too long. So I said, what's happened to you? You've suddenly got really good, and you know, well done. You've made it. We didn't know, but you've had the breakthrough moment that we were all hoping for, you know. And she just said, I read it, I thought about it, then I answered the questions out loud. And she, you know, that's just what worked for her once a day.
And these are the things that you've mentioned are actually some of the things that I really focus on in my ebooks about how to practice speaking without a partner and how to learn to think in English. I really liked the first thing that you mentioned, which was at the end of the day, talk to yourself about your day. Um, that's an excellent thing to do because you don't need to use your brain to create new topics. You just think about what happened. And it's also great because you're checking that you have the vocabulary for things that are actually important because they're the things that you are really experiencing. You probably don't need to learn about lizards and air conditioning vents and things like that, but you might need to talk about the meeting you had earlier that day. You might need to talk about a problem that you had at the bus stop. So that's a great way to check, do I have the vocab that I need to talk about the things that are actually important in my life, which is usually most of what you really should be focusing on if your goal was just everyday communication. And the other thing is you can also do that in the morning. Like when you wake up, talk about, what are my goals for today? What do I need to do today? What do I want to do today? What am I looking forward to doing today? And you can actually just take these questions and post them on a mirror in your bedroom or in your bathroom so that, like, every morning when you wake up, you see those questions and you remember, oh, I should practice speaking right now. And it's also just, it might help you if you have to use English during your day because you might ask yourself, what we have a meeting today. What are we going to talk about in the meeting? We're going to talk about, oh no, I don't know the English word. So now you look it up and you're actually preparing yourself to be more confident in a real English conversation that you will have later in the day. So yeah, at the end of the day, beginning of the day, throughout the whole day, all great times to do this. Yeah. So, most of the things that we've talked about have been about how you can improve your English by yourself. But obviously, there is value in having a teacher. So, what do you think are the advantages of learning with a teacher? Is this something that people should want to do?
I would say definitely. If you need it, if you feel you need it. For me, it's you know, once a week or twice a week or even once a month with busy people, but just keeping that part of you exercised, you know, speaking and discovering your identity in some ways in another language and feeling very safe. So you're not in this survival mode where, oh no, now I'm going to speak English. Here we go. Oh, I'm in a meeting. Oh, I'm just going to say loads of things really quickly because I'm actually really, really scared. You know, let's slow down. Ah, let's say it in a different way. You can try things out, you know. So I think having a teacher is really good for motivation, I think. And yeah, being sociable and kind of having a new friend, really. Not everyone needs a teacher, not everyone wants a teacher, but I love what I do. And I have students I've had for more than 4 or 5 years. And it's something we do every week. It's part of their lives, and they're part of my life, and it's something that is personal to me and that I value so much, and I believe they do. Especially if you're settling in a new country, for example, I can help people when they're looking for a house. Okay, in the UK, this is housing law, and this is how you would go about it, and this is probably what not to ask, and this is probably what to ask as well. And when they say that, what they mean is, these kind of things where you might translate it in kind of the wrong way and think, oh no, they're not interested. And things like job interviews, having a teacher to practice things like that with, whether you're native or non-native, that's always going to help your performance, I believe.
I really like that answer. I think it shows how much you also care about your students. Um, One thing that I really liked about it is you mentioned the relationship between the teacher and the students. And this is something that I think a lot of learners who have never studied with a teacher don't understand. What they think is that the teacher is just going to feed them information. You need to say this, you need to say this. This is how this works. This is how this works. This is a grammar rule. That's not usually what a good teacher does. In my opinion, what makes a good teacher is that they remember who you are, and they remember 1 month ago they made this mistake. And they might not even remember that, but I remember that. So I'm going to include that language in the conversation again to make sure that now they are using it correctly. And I'm also going to review some of the things that I remember that they did very well at so that they can feel more confident as they use it correctly right now. So it's not just about giving them information, it's about knowing what they need, both in correction and in helping them to feel more confident with the things that they know well, and just remembering, like, oh, this is what they did last week. I should ask them something about that. And it's a safe space to make mistakes. It's not just about learning by receiving information. It's about having a place where you feel comfortable trying new things, making mistakes, learning from your mistakes, laughing at your mistakes with another person who's a real human being. Because when you have another human, emotions are involved. And when emotions are involved, one, it's more interesting. Two, you're going to remember everything better.
I've taken some Thai lessons, and I was so impressed with my teacher because um, he pushed me, and I was so afraid of being pushed, which I can imagine. It's good to be a student and a teacher, but he knew not to push me too hard and start speaking really, really quickly. I asked him to slow down a bit. And then when my ears got used to him, he actually could go faster again. So it's kind of just being an experienced person, yeah, we're not doctors, but in some ways it's a bit like that, being an experienced teacher with years of practice and different personalities, and what works for one person doesn't work for someone else. And we do know that. And also it's very easy to find out. We do something together. It was a bit flat. I'll try a different approach next time. Or maybe the student says, no, I loved it. I just need to think about it more. And then you'll do it again next week. So this kind of constantly progressing, but at the same point, maybe you've got the flu or something. And then we could do something fun, or we could talk about what's on the TV at the moment. And I can give you some vocabulary about films and things like that you haven't thought of. And, it doesn't have to be a mind blowing, really difficult challenge every time. It should be enjoyable and useful.
Before we finish up the episode, do you have any other just general words of wisdom or pieces of advice that you would like to give to my audience?
Yeah, I think keep going, really. It is tough. English is a massive language. I mean, so are most languages. There's always something to learn, and you're always going to hit those, you're going to go up and then you're going to hit a plateau and feel like you're never going to improve again. But you will make those breakthroughs. It's the way the brain learns language. So keep going. If it's really upsetting you and you feel like you really can't progress, try and find a different method, or give yourself a break just for a day or something. Because I do have students who study constantly, and often those are the ones who can't speak much because there's too much going in, and it's the way they learn at school. So who's to say what's right and what's wrong? But if you try to get a balance between speaking and writing and listening and reading, find things you enjoy and practice. And then also, if you feel like you're not progressing, just make a very little plan. Okay, I'm going to study English 3 times this week for 20 minutes. And it's going to be this amount of time. And then you just write down what you did. You don't have to write a million notes that you may not look at again. But that's the way to check you're still doing it. I feel like some people kind of just give up, and that's not going to help you.
I love it. I love it. I think that's an excellent way to end this episode. So, Zoe, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Always a pleasure, Mike.
So, yeah, that's all for this episode. Thank you all very much for watching. And if you haven't done it yet, please don't forget to check out my other series, Ask an American.